of our program. During the Q&A, please remember to use the hand raise icon at the top of your screen. And if you have a question during the presentation and you are concerned you may forget, feel free to type your question into the chat. Tim Ebbesberger of our staff will be monitoring the chat, and he'll also be moderating the Q&A session. Today, we are honored to have DEP Commissioner Sean LaTourette with us. The DEP under Commissioner LaTourette has prioritized modernizing stormwater infrastructure as part of its overall strategy to make the state more resilient to climate change. This work includes efforts to address combined sewer overflows in urban areas, assist local governments with forming stormwater utilities, and incentivize green infrastructure and related projects to improve the health of our watersheds. Welcome, Commissioner.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Director Andrews, our Assistant Commissioner, Katrina Angarone, Assistant Commissioner for Watershed and Land Management, the entire team working so hard under Katie and Anika's leadership in order to advance the important work of better caring for our watersheds. And so just to offer some perspective on what work we are endeavoring to advance here with you all and how we intend to support our local, municipal, and county partners in this shared endeavor. I just wanted to offer a few thoughts relative to our holistic approach to watershed management, and within that, our deep commitment to supporting our local partners in best managing their stormwater, because the truth is that our water, all of our water, like each of us, is interconnected. Our rural farms, our dense cities and suburbs, our scenic and our working waterfronts, and the roadways and infrastructure that connect them all, that all exists in a watershed. And it can be easy to take that interconnectivity for granted. But here in New Jersey, and certainly at the DEP, we do not. We acknowledge that only through a commitment to sound watershed management can we ensure clean waterways where we can fish and recreate, and from which, importantly, we draw a significant amount of our drinking water. So I think it's important to reflect for a moment on the multiple forces at play that impact our state's water quality, and by extension, our drinking water and our flood risk, right? For example, how we develop, conserve, and manage our land, and the water that runs off of it has significant implications for our water quality. Runoff collects unseen pollutants from every land surface and ultimately deposits them in our waterways. And without a sufficient commitment to watershed management, we can, for example, inadvertently create the conditions in which harmful algal blooms multiply, as we saw across Lake Hopatcong in the summer of 2019 and have consistently seen in some of our reservoirs. And just last year, a 9-mile harmful algal bloom infected the Millstone River and almost put us in a position where one of our most critical drinking water intakes in the state was in jeopardy, right? And watershed impairments, they increase the cost for cleaning our source water for drinking, they reduce recreational availability, they harm waterfront businesses, and it amplifies the cost for restoration, if that's even possible. So by recognizing that we have to take good care at the outset to preserve and improve our watersheds, we are able to work together to advance sound practices and protocols that see us preserving land-based resources like wetlands, ensuring the protection of stream corridors, and very importantly, find us aiding our local partners in their own, with their own obligations to manage their stormwater, because all of this is knit together. And so over the last several years, the DEP has worked to streamline our approach to municipal stormwater permitting. And we recognize that that streamlining will work requirements upon our municipal partners. And we want to let you all know that we are here for you, both with technical support and putting our money where our mouth is, so that we are supporting your efforts in this work, including through the offer of nearly $20 million in grants to assist our municipalities with new stormwater permitting requirements. And so what the team will speak about today is both the MS4 permitting program and the availability of this funding to assist you in meeting those obligations. And importantly, our support for you doesn't stop there. For any one of our local partners that are looking hard at their stormwater management imperatives and their flood risk mitigation issues, I would encourage every single one of you to visit our water infrastructure investment plan website. And I'm going to apologize for my dog in the background there. And that website is nj.gov/DEP/.
They're so cute.
Oh, they're delightful, but they also think they're protecting me from every Amazon delivery person in the neighborhood, of which there are many. So nj.gov/WIP, and I'm sorry, nj.gov/DEP/WIP. And that is a place that you can go to get our support, much of it principally for stormwater infrastructure capital investment and upgrade. Please take advantage of that. We are here to help you. And I will turn it over to the team, but first thank them for the hard work. It's not always easy to be at the DEP. Not everybody likes what we say all the time. Not everybody experiences the hard work we are pursuing as help. And we fully recognize that. And this team is exceptional. And I thank them, Katie, Anika, Gabe, Nancy, everyone across our watershed program. Thank you. And we look forward to working with all of you. And we appreciate your being here today.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now we will have our presentation of the layout of the grants program. This will be an effort tag team by Gabe Mahan, Bureau Chief, as well as Nancy Kemple, Section Chief of the MS4 program. Take it away.
So hello and good morning, everybody. I'm going to turn my camera off and get the presentation going here. So it looks like everything is ready to go. Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Nancy Kemple, and I am the Section Chief in the Bureau of NJPT's Stormwater Permitting and Water Quality Management, which also includes the MS4 Stormwater Program. As Commissioner LaTourette just mentioned, the department has been able to make $19 million available through two separate grant programs to all Tier A municipalities. one for the original Tier A municipalities and a second one for new Tier A municipalities. These grants are designed to help your municipalities meet the updated Tier A permit requirements, which in turn will help improve the quality of our surface and groundwaters and help mitigate local stormwater. I'm sorry, something just happened with my presentation. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry about that. Somehow somebody took control. Hopefully we're back. Okay.
You're
So,
back up.
okay, thank you. Okay, so these grants are designed to help improve the quality of our surface water and groundwaters in the state and help mitigate local stormwater related flooding. I'm going to briefly go over the specifics of these two programs, and I've included some email addresses and web link resources at the end of the presentation to help you once we post this after we're done here today, so you can find the contact information and links to the documents related to these grant programs and the MS4 program. Once I'm done, we have time scheduled to answer any questions you have. So to start, I'm going to go over a little background on our stormwater program. The department was originally delegated back in the early 1980s by the US EPA to implement the federal National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES for short, permitting program under the authority of the Federal Clean Water Act. The department then adopted our state regulations for the New Jersey Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NJPDES. So this original delegation and the regulations were then amended later to include the 1990 and 1990 federal Phase 1 and Phase 2 NPDES stormwater programs. All of our Tier A municipalities all currently qualify as small MS4s under that federal definition and are therefore regulated under the Phase 2 rules. We issued the first MS4 permits back in 2004, and this last renewal that was issued in January is the fourth iteration of the Tier A permit. So since we are a delegated NPDES state, EPA also has oversight over how we implement this program and how they are required to periodically audit our program. As a result of their 2016 audit review and comments they submitted on our 2018 Tier A permit renewal, we were basically directed to improve our Tier A permit requirements to improve water quality, especially for areas that discharge the waters with pollutant impairments and waters where total maximum daily loads, or TMDLs, had been developed to address those impairments. In response, we've reviewed the water quality impairment list and the TMDLs to determine how to address EPA's concerns. That review showed that water quality impairments and/or the TMDLs exist in almost every town in New Jersey, including all of the towns that were previously assigned to Tier B. So since the Tier B permit was issued under the authority of the state regulations only and not under federal law, we do not have the authority to include the necessary water quality. Hold on, somehow. I'm sorry, I keep losing control. Sorry. So because of that construct in the state and federal rules, we do not have the authority to include the necessary water quality-based requirements in the Tier B permit, and this resulted in the need to reassign all 101 previous Tier B municipalities to Tier A. So also, back in 2004, when we issued the first Tier A permit, the department was able to award grants to those original Tier A municipalities to assist them with creating their stormwater programs. And now we're able to, again, offer grants to both the new and original Tier A municipalities to help implement these latest Tier A requirements. So for the first of these grant programs for the original Tier A municipalities, we are offering $25,000 to assist with the development of their stormwater infrastructure maps. This grant will be dispersed in 2 lump sums, with the first as an initial payment of $15,000 payable upon receipt of the completed grant application, which can be submitted at any time until midnight this calendar year. Midnight December 31st of this calendar year. The second or final payment of $10,000 will be awarded upon receipt of the final map. The renewal permit does not require that this map be submitted until January 1st, 2026. So for this mapping requirement, the Tier A permit requires that all of the stormwater infrastructure now be mapped to better manage stormwater runoff. This broader mapping will also assist towns with identifying and correcting the sources of pollutants that are causing the water quality impairments in your local waterways, as well as identifying the sources of stormwater flooding and stream scouring. The previous 2018 Tier A permit required outfall pipe mapping and infrastructure inventories and required routine maintenance of that infrastructure. This mapping requirement in the Tier A renewal basically builds on that previous work. To assist you with these mapping requirements, the MS4 program has developed free-to-use mapping tools and purchased free ArcGIS licenses to loan to municipalities. These mapping tools were actually created prior to the 2018 permit renewal and are still available and are being updated to accommodate additional types of infrastructure. I've provided the link here on the slide to our MS4 webpage, where these mapping tools and other related information can be found. Also, some of our MS4 staff are available to provide training on the use of these GIS tools, and that training can be done either virtually via Teams or in person, and can be provided for individuals or even larger groups. Now for the grant program for the new Tier A municipalities, we are offering $75,000 to assist with the development of your Tier A stormwater program, along with development of the stormwater pollution prevention plans, which are also known as SPPPs or SP3s for short. And these document your stormwater programs. This grant will also be dispersed in 2 lump sums, with the initial payment of $25,000 payable upon receipt of the completed application, which again can be submitted up until midnight, December 31st of this year. And the second or final payment of $50,000 will be payable upon receipt of the completed SP3. For this requirement, all Tier A towns are required to develop stormwater programs and to document the details of those programs in their SP3s. These programs are important because the operation of your storm sewer systems has a great effect on the quality of the surface and groundwaters in your area that you and your residents in turn use for drinking, swimming, fishing, etc. And the municipal storm sewer systems and their operation also have a great effect on stormwater related flooding, as we saw from Hurricane Ida a year and a half ago. The flooding, we understand, may never be completely eliminated, but proper management of your storm sewers will help reduce the frequency and the magnitude of the impacts from these storms. So having a written SP3 also ensures that all appropriate employees in your town understand how the town plans to comply with the various permit requirements through the specific activities that they are personally required to perform as part of their jobs. The SP3 is also required to be used as a training tool for various municipal employees to explain these permit requirements and the tasks that are required to be done by each employee in order to implement these permit requirements. We are just about done finalizing the updated SP3 template to match the new permit. So each section of this permit has a corresponding section in the SP3. And we're including some example text to help illustrate the level of detail that should be included in the documents. This template will be available on our webpage as an editable Word document and as a fillable PDF, and will hopefully be posted within the next week or so. Also, each of our MS4 county case managers are available to provide questions and answers to, guidance and answers to your questions as you complete your SP3s. In addition to that assistance, we are also finalizing our new Stormwater Program Coordinator training program in response to a number of requests from various municipalities over the past few years. We plan to schedule those sessions during the summer. This training will provide guidance to your stormwater coordinators on completing and updating their SP3s and in order to meet your permit conditions. So here are just quick screenshots of the application documents. You can see here they're easy fillable PDF documents. You'll just need to provide the name and mailing address and permit number of your municipality, the name of your stormwater program coordinator, and their address and information as much as it differs from your towns. And then responsible municipal official is required to sign the certification at the bottom of the application with either an electronic signature or wet ink signature. There is also a one-page list of directions following each of the application forms when you open the document, including the email box for where to send the completed application, as well as the postal address for where to mail the paper copy if you choose to submit it in that format. So we're getting close to the end here. Here's a quick look at our webpage where this information is located. You can see from the grants tab across the second blue bar down on the screen, you choose the choose the Stormwater Grants row from the drop-down menu, and there is the web page with all of the pertinent information for these grants with links to the notice of funding availability, which fully describes the grant programs, as well as links to the MS4 program web pages where you can find the Tier A permit, the SP3 forms, etc. So lastly, this wraps up my short overview of the grant program, and I've included a resource contact information slide here, which includes my email address along with that of our Bureau Chief Gabriel Mann, and a link to our MS4 case managers' email addresses, as well as our Bureau phone number. I've also included links under the second bullet, including ones that I've listed in earlier slides. And also, just so you know, the MS4 program link here, again, has the draft and the final permits, the SP3 template, or will have that shortly. Also has links to the mapping application tools. We'll have our model ordinances, outfall inspection forms, as well as our MS4 guidance, which we are actively updating, as well as links to our stormwater management webpage and many other resources. So thank you for your time and patience. Sorry. Go ahead, Anika.
Oh, no, you're fine. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so we're going to turn it over now to Tim Eversberger, who's going to moderate our question and answer period. And he is also happens to be our mapping expert. So Tim, I guess we can start.
Thanks, Nancy. Just a reminder to anyone who wants to ask a question. If you are just using the chat feature today, don't have a microphone, you can type up your question in the chat box and we can read that out loud and get that answered. If you would like to vocalize your question, please use the raise your hand feature at the top toolbar in the Teams app. We will call on people who have their hands raised they can unmute themselves and ask their questions. So we do have a question in the chat already for Nancy and Gabe from Sharon McCullough. If a previous Tier A municipality already has their stormwater mapped, can they use the funds for another aspect of the MS4 requirements?
Well, the funding can be used to reimburse you for work that you already did as well. So it doesn't necessarily need to be something that you're going to do. We already confirmed that with our financial people that it's fine for it to be something you already finished. But I would say that, it'll depend on what map you have done, because if you're not entirely aware, the mapping requirements under the new Tier 8 permit are expanded from what they were under the previous requirement. So if you had only completed what was required before, the map that you have done actually will need to be improved to meet the current permit.
Thanks, Kate. Another question in the chat from Diane McDaniel from Stockton Borough. How soon will municipalities receive the first payment?
It's hard to say exactly when you'll receive the first payment. So after you submit us the application, we need to process it and then send it over to our financial people to send you the payment. I assume that will happen in not too long after you submit the application, but really it's all about when you submit the application so we can start processing it and get it sent over to get that payment rolling. So the sooner you submit us the application, the sooner you'll get that payment.
Great, thanks, Gabe. Question from the engineering division. How soon does a Tier A municipality, that's actually the same question, so Gabe just answered that. So the sooner you get your application in, the sooner you get your payment. Question from Michael Sioko. So existing Tier A is only eligible for 25,000. That's correct. Existing Tier A's will only receive 25,000 at this point in time. We have a question from Don Baselli. Deerfield Township is a farming community, no waterways, no sewer or public water. Our runoff is farm related and we don't control that. What are we regulating?
So certainly there's waterways in Deerfield Township that storm sewer system discharges to, and that's basically what we're regulating. You have a storm sewer system and it discharges to surface waters or groundwaters of the state. And there are pollutants that are contained within those discharges, and that's required for us to regulate that.
Tim, you've got a hand up.
Thank you. Yasmin, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. This is Yasmin. I'm a principal environmental planner with the city of Hoboken in New Jersey. Just wanted to ask the question, first, maybe I'm just unfamiliar. Is this just for one grant opportunity, or are there multiple grants that we're discussing today for stormwater? My other question is, how does this relate to the stormwater utility that the state was proposing at some point? And then my third question is, sorry, is we have, we were recently designated as a Tier A community. And so how does that transition work for us?
Okay, so I'm sorry, what was the first question again?
The first question.
Is a one-time grant program? That's what it was?
Well, no, are there multiple grants that we're discussing today, or is it just this one that we're talking about? Like how many opportunities? Okay.
Yeah, technically there's two grants that we're talking about, right? One that's available to those municipalities that were already Tier A, and one separate program that's available to those that were recently redesignated as Tier A. So you fall into that second category in Hoboken because you were recently redesignated. So you're eligible for 75,000. But it's not an ongoing program at this point. It's 75,000. You'll get half or part of the payment when you make your application, and then the other part when you complete the requirements. So for you, that's submitting a complete stormwater pollution prevention plan.
Got it. And then the second question had to do with the stormwater utility. Recently, Hoboken was, investigating how to bring a stormwater utility vis-a-vis a feasibility study that we were doing with a consultant. For certain reasons, we put that on hold, but how does that relate to grants that the DEP has? I mean, does it relate at all? Is it totally separate? We're looking for funding effectively to do the O&M on our resiliency parks, right? So where's that money coming from?
So this money under this grant program is specifically designated for you to implement your MS4 program. So your resiliency parks, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but are all in your combined sewer areas, right? So
Yeah.
the funds associated with this grant program would not be something you could use to maintain those parks. Now, I wouldn't say that it's entirely unrelated from a stormwater utility because, we're talking about all things that are stormwater related, but there's no direct link between this grant program and a stormwater utility. They're two separate sources of funding. So if you are looking for a way to fund those parks, I mean, a stormwater utility is one way that you could do that. This grant program is not.
Thank you for that clarification. I guess one thing I wanted to say was, though, that Hoboken, the entire community, is a CSO community. We're entirely like
That's
yeah.
not. No, there is a section of Hoboken that is separately sewered, which is why you have an MS4 permit.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jasmine. Next question, there's actually two questions and they're somewhat related. May I use grant funds to defray costs of a new employee who will be primarily engaged in map data collection? And going along with that, what if volunteers complete work? Are we still eligible for the grant?
The answer is yes to both of those questions. So the grant, you can use volunteers. I assume that you're not paying those volunteers, but there's still going to be other costs in your stormwater program. So you can just use the grant funds on those other costs.
Okay, great, thanks. Is there a deadline for when the map needs to be completed? The answer to that is yes. The permit requires the stormwater infrastructure map to be completed 3 years from the effective date of permit, which is January 1st, 2023. So it'll be 2 and 3 years from that date. Next question from the chat. Will there be any additional grants in the future for existing Tier A municipalities?
That's really unknown at this time. I mean, we've been trying to get as much money to our municipalities as we can, but I just don't know what the future holds in that regard.
Okay, great. Is there a sample map to show how new requirements of sources of flooding and scour are to be shown?
I'm not sure I really understand the question. There's no sample map on our website. I mean, all the maps for every municipality are unique, but we do have a listing of all the infrastructure that needs to be included on your map. And I mean, showing sources of scour is not something that is on the map. But of course, you have to inspect your outfalls periodically to see if there's scour at the outfalls, but that's not something that you would show. I don't know how you would show that on the map. So I'm not sure I understand that part of the question.
Okay. Nancy, if that didn't answer your question, if you could please clarify in the chat, we'll get that answered for you.
I was going to just jump in, Tim. I was
Sure.
just to clarify if something I said wasn't clear, but I think we're requiring the mapping to be done in the permit so that you can use the mapping to investigate sources of flooding yourself. So if you find, or stream scouring, if you have that situation, you would be able to use your infrastructure map to basically backtrack through your system and find the locations that contribute to those areas and be able to hone in on where the problems might be located. So it's really going to be a site-specific type of issue and something that the towns would have to figure out as they go through and evaluate the drainage areas for their different outfalls.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. For another question from the chat, for new Tier A communities, what is the due date for the completed SP3 to be submitted? I know it was noted on one of the slides, but I didn't catch the date in time.
So you have 1 year from when the permit was issued, so that gives you basically until the beginning of next year.
Great, next question from the chat. Will there be an accounting of expenditures required with the submission of the completed map?
That's a good question. We didn't actually say you have to do that in the NOFA. So as long as you don't disclose to us that you spent it on something that's not stormwater related.
Okay, great. Will there be opportunities for funding stormwater utility feasibility studies?
So we had a program that we opened last year to do just that, right? We had $2 million available to fund the formation of stormwater utilities. We received about 30 applications for that, and we are currently working to get quotes from our contractor on how much each of those individual studies is going to cost. With 30 of them, it seems unlikely we will be able to fund all of them with the $2 million that we have, but we're hopeful that we can fund about half of those 30. But we still have to get exact costs from the contractor before we know exactly how many of those we can fund. But that program, like application for that program, is closed at this point.
Okay, great, thanks.
Tim, if I may,
Oh, sure,
I would just add, if there are things that you are interested in seeing the state grant, we're always open. We're always listening.
Next question. If we print and sign the application with a wet ink signature, can we scan the signed document and email it to you, or do we have to mail the form with a wet ink signature?
You can scan it and email it to us. That's fine.
Okay, when will the sample ordinance templates be released?
Yeah, so we've been trying to get those released as soon as possible, but our legal team is actually reviewing them right now and haven't been able to get it through them at any quick pace. So I'm hopeful, though, that we can get some feedback from them in the next week or two so we can get those posted. We do want to post them draft so you can provide comments on what we put out there, but hopefully that'll be very soon.
Okay, next question. Can we pay professional fees out of grant monies?
If those are for MS4 related expenses, sure.
Okay. Would videoing of the lines also be covered by grant money while doing the mapping?
If it's necessary to perform maintenance on your MS4 system, then I would say yes.
Great. Next one, would GPS tablet purchases be part of eligible costs?
If you're going to use those for mapping your infrastructure, sure, yeah.
Great. Next question. My community, Middletown Township, the cost to implement this program will exceed $4 million per year and $1.7 million to start it up. $25,000 is really not going to cut it.
I mean, I'm confused by the question a bit. What do you mean to start it up? Doesn't Middletown Township already have an MS4 program?
So Anthony, if you'd like to clarify that, if you have a microphone, you can unmute yourself. If not, you can type it in the chat. While we're waiting for clarification there, next question is, Alamucci is made up of 80 to 90% of private homeowners associations, with a majority of stormwater in this development. Do they need to comply?
Well, the MS4 requirements apply to the municipally owned or operated stormwater infrastructure. So if it's something that's in a private development, that's not specifically part of your MS4. However, the permit does require that you are ensuring private property owners are maintaining their facilities, but it doesn't actually require you to map or maintain their infrastructure for them.
Okay, great.
I've been able to unmute. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thanks, Anthony. Good.
What I was referring to was the whole breadth of the Tier A program for things like street sweeping and maintenance and testing of areas where woody products are stored and things like that is a huge program in my community. And there's just no way a community can afford to absorb that kind of a cost immediately into its budget. And I thought I would hope that there would be more funding available to make it viable for us to even do it.
Well, I understand that $25,000 is not enough to run your entire program, but it's hopefully enough to help with your mapping. Middletown Township has been a Tier A MS4 permittee since 2004, so the vast majority of the requirements in the MS4 permit have already been applicable to Middletown Township for years.
Parts of it are one thing, but now there are new requirements that involve sweeping streets 3 times a year. In Middletown, that's 700 miles of road. And disposing of the material from street sweeping will cost about $3 million a year every year. Just the disposal costs alone. So I'm just saying that the mapping part of it is just one piece of it, but now there's another whole new set of regulations that went into effect this year that are needed to be implemented by, I believe it's 2024, that expose us to huge costs that there's no funding for.
Well, I mean, it depends on exactly what funding you're talking about. Like if you need to purchase street sweepers, certainly there are low interest loans available from the department you could use to purchase street sweepers. I understand that loans are not as desirable as grants, but nonetheless, they are available. There already was a street sweeping requirement in the previous Tier A permit, so it shouldn't be an entirely new requirement. But yeah, I understand that the total land area that you have to sweep is likely expanded.
Well, and the frequency, but again, the most expensive part of it, and this is one area where maybe the state can help us out, just the disposal of the materials that are swept will be about $3 million a year, because you have to pay to dispose of that material. That's something, if the state, the DEP can look at those disposal costs, and if there's a way to, offset that some way or find a common way for us to all to dispose of these materials, because that cost, if you subtracted that cost out of it, it's a little bit more manageable. Still very, very expensive, but a little bit more manageable. But $3 million a year just to dispose of what we're sweeping, and plus 3 times a year, plus another sweep if you have a snow event where you so it could be, thankfully this year it wasn't so bad, but in some years it could be 3 more sweeps that we have to do immediately after snowstorms.
Well, on that last
Thank
point,
you for that. And I'm sorry, Gabe, I'll just say that perhaps we could talk offline to get a little bit more information about that and understand it better. As folks probably on the line know, that the parameter that we continue to that continues to worsen in the state of New Jersey, and that is very difficult to treat in drinking water, of course, is salt. So, that's what we're hoping to address. But if we could talk offline, maybe get some more information about that, that would be helpful for us to understand those disposal costs.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
but I do want to clarify a few things while the sweeping is required at 3 times per year, that's actually a reduction in the frequency that was required under the last permit. The last permit required sweeping to be done monthly. So we understand that we expanded the area you need to sweep, but at the same time, we reduced that frequency to only 3 times a year rather than monthly. And then you mentioned sweeping after snowstorms. That's not a requirement of the permit. The requirement of the permit is that you clean up any large piles of salt that were incidentally dropped by spreaders. So that doesn't require you to sweep all your streets. It simply requires you to find those small areas where that happened and pick up those piles, I think likely by shovel rather than using a street sweeper to do that.
All right, thanks, Gabe. And thanks, Anthony, for your input. Like Katie said, we'll catch up offline and make sure all your questions get answered. The next question, is there a presentation about the mapping requirements for the new permit on the website? So there are a number of presentations available on our Tier A website before the permit went out. Basically, they were outreach presentations. So I can put a link to that in the chat. If you find that those presentations don't satisfy what you're looking for, please don't hesitate to contact us and we can answer any questions you have about the new mapping requirements. The next question we have is, if the state is looking for things to grant, how about repairs and upgrades to drainage infrastructure that is not doing a great job of keeping sediment and contaminants out of Class 1 waterways in the Highlands area?
So I mean, if those are part of your MS4, I would think you could use this grant money towards their maintenance and repair. But I mean, I guess you're suggesting a larger grant program. So that's something we can definitely take into consideration when we determine our next funding.
So I just wanted to jump in real fast before you move on. So for Anthony's comment about the street sweeping being required within 1 year, I think between draft and final permit issuances, we noted that the street sweeping requirement being based on whether your inlet's drained to surface water or not is tied to the mapping requirement pretty much, since you need to know where your outfalls are and where your drainage areas are. So the requirement to begin the triennial street sweeping doesn't start for 3 years, not 1 year. So just to give you a little bit of a breather on that.
Thanks, Nancy. I see Yasmin has her hand raised again. Would you like to unmute yourself? And
Sure. Hi. Just one last question. So regarding street sweeping, does that mean that if we're in an MS4 location with those inlets, that our street sweeping is covered by this grant? Or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Any activities that you're undertaking under your MS4 program, you could spend this grant money on. So yes, sweeping the separately sewered area. So that is a small section of Hoboken could be covered.
So when you say separately sewered, it means like we've actually separated the water and the sewer lines already, right? It's not that we're proposing to, it's that we've already done that work.
Either you've already done it or they were never combined in that section in the first place, or
Everything
whatever.
was combined. Everything was combined in Hoboken. We're going in and separating
Hoboken,
now.
Hoboken has had a section that's separately sewered since at least 2004 because you've had an MS4 permit dating back to then.
Okay.
okay, thanks. The next question comes from the chat. Under the deliverables timeline, what is the difference between the catch basin and inlet inspection and maintenance program requirements? They are both storm inlets, correct? One and the same?
So the only difference there is we tried to draw a distinction to help people understand the intent of the two cleaning programs, because there's a big distinction between sweeping the leaves off the road surface at the inlet and opening that inlet up and actually vacuuming the debris out from the catch basin itself. So that's why there's two separate schedules. It's much easier to do the inspection of the inlet at the ground surface than it is to actually vacuum out the catch basin itself. So there's two separate requirements in the permit to clarify when each is required. And the catch basin is required less frequently than the inlet itself.
Okay. Just a comment here, Raritan Township has the same concerns as Middletown. Any assistance to offset the cost are appreciated. There's another question about street sweeping, but I believe we've been over that a bit here. Please contact us directly and we can go more in depth about the street sweeping requirements. Just because we've spent a bit of time on that already, we want to make sure we get to some of the other questions. Next question is Hainesport Township, Burlington County. An existing Tier A was not required to street sweep. Well, this is a bit different. Sweep per prior regs. Now we have 3 times per year and dispose of materials. So yes, we now have additional cost consideration. So again, with that, please contact us directly with street sweeping questions and we can get to pick those up with you offline. Next question is, what is the deadline for this grant?
The deadline to make an application is the end of this year. There's not an actual set deadline in the grant to provide the next part. So if you are a new Tier A to provide your stormwater pollution prevention plan, there's no deadline set in the grant to do that, but there is a deadline set in the MS4 permit to do that. And the same is true of the existing Tier As. There is no deadline in the grant for submitting your map to receive the second payment from the grant, but there is a deadline in the MS4 permit by which you have to do that. That's 3 years out.
Okay, great. So at this point, actually, we have a comment from Paul Ferreira in the chat. Under the DEP definitions, the drainage inlet is only the cast iron grate at the surface. A catch basin is a structure under an inlet that has a means of collecting debris and solids, and that goes along with what Gabe has already mentioned. At this point, I don't see any new questions in the chat or any hands raised. We have about 3 minutes before we have to move on to closing remarks from Katie Angarone. So does anyone have any final questions before we wrap up this session? And again, if you think of any questions later, please do not hesitate to reach out to us and ask us via email. I did post one of our emails in the chat, stormwatermanager@dep.nj.gov. You can reach us there. Otherwise, any of the folks who have spoken today, feel free to email them directly as well, and they can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay.
All right, so one last question here. It's like, sorry, Katie. When do you expect to notify recipients of this stormwater utility grant?
That's hard to say at this point because we still have to go to our contractors and get actual bids from them on each one of the proposals that we received. So I mean, I just don't know how long that's going to take, right? So we need to do that. Then we need to evaluate how much all those are going to cost in comparison to the $2 million that we have and see which ones we can fund. And then we'll go out and announce the recipients.
Thanks, Gabe and Tim. And now I would like to introduce WLM's Assistant Commissioner, Katrina Angarone.
Thanks, Anika, and thanks, Gabe. I am delighted to see so many folks here today. We have, oh, sorry, wrong remarks. Goodness, I apologize. At any rate, yeah, I'm delighted to see so many partners in the room. We know, and we heard it today, that this is kind of a challenging time. I know personally that local governments are managing more issues than ever, not only a pandemic, but also aging infrastructure and a changing climate. So as we heard from the commissioner at the outset, climate change isn't off in the distance. It's here, and we're dealing with the impacts right now. We are, I think we are all seeing new areas that are flooding. We are all seeing harmful algal blooms. Some of them occurring in our drinking water sources. We are seeing drinking water treatment costs rise alongside those things. And as a result, we are here committed to helping ensure that your communities are prepared and that public and environmental health continues to be protected. So we know that's an investment worth making, which is why we're providing grants to do so. And we're open to hearing about other ways that we can support you, whether that is grant funding or programs or training or software. We're all ears, or partnering with other folks who can provide those same things. We know it's not always easy, and we certainly know that this is not the only issue that you have on your plate. So again, we are glad to offer funding and moreover assistance. So I do encourage you to reach out to Gabe and Nancy and your MS4 case manager as much as you need. They are here for you. That is our role. And we will give you all the help that we can. So thank you for your attendance today, and we will look forward to working together.
Thank you. Again, I just want to reiterate, if anyone needs to connect offline, please contact us and we'll make arrangements to talk with you and work through things offline. We'll also be offering additional sessions. We are planning on holding them quarterly just to walk people through the process. Since we do have rolling admissions, again, we are here to help you. And we look forward to continued partnership with you. Gabe, Nancy, I don't know if you have any other remarks you'd like.
No, I'll just say, thanks for being here. Like everyone else already said, we do want this to be cooperative. So really, to whatever help you need with, implementing the new requirements in the MS4 permit, please do reach out to our case managers. We've had individual meetings with municipalities to go over all of the requirements, whether you're a new TRA or you were already a TRA, we're happy to do that. If there's anything that you're not sure about how you're supposed to implement it, we really do want to clarify that. And particularly when it comes to mapping, we can help you go through a lot of the mapping and figure out what you need to do. So please just reach out to us.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedules. Have a wonderful day.